Hey folks, welcome to our Unity 2020 Campfire. I am very pleased to introduce the two guests for this evening. Ryan Bennet is on, I believe, the left part of your screen, and Elisabeth Sweet is on the right side of your screen. They are friends of mine who are volunteers in the Unity 2020 organization. You'll see that they are an indication of the amazing collection of awesome that has arrived on our doorstep as a result of people recognizing how much danger we're in and how much the Republic needs our help. So welcome, Elisabeth and Ryan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
All right. So I should correct something. I introduced a few minutes ago, I suggested people go and log into Democracy AI so that they could interact with us. That's still something that they should do. But in suggesting that, I made a joke about still fumbling with Tinder in order to get the campfire going. And I got a flood of correspondence from people under 35 who alerted me that Tinder is not only a physical mechanism for starting fires, it is also now a software platform that allows people to have sex with each other without having to talk. So I didn't realize that. But anyway, my bad. We were in fact talking about real Tinder of a metaphorical kind for our campfire. So let me explain a little bit about what campfire is and why we're using that metaphor. Campfire is a place that for likely millions of years, humans have gathered at the point when the light was failing and they were therefore no longer going to be ecologically productive. And at those moments, people would either have talked and joked and sung and danced, and in times that were not so good, they would have talked about what was supposed to happen next. So we in the Unity movement have appropriated the metaphor of campfire to stimulate these kinds of conversations. And as you'll see, there's lots of outgrowths from using this metaphor. Among them, a campfire is something that you can take an ember from and start your own discussions, which is something we very much hope that you will do. All right, so let's get to the business of the evening. We have announced 6 candidates who rose to the top of our nomination program, and through Democracy AI, you all are going to be telling us something about how you feel about those 6 and the tickets that they might be arranged into through our voting process. Sorry, I'm struggling a little bit with my glasses and this font size. Okay, so you've logged into Democracy AI, and we are, from the announcement of having 6 candidates that can be arranged into 9 tickets, we are going to have a Unity 2020 vote. That voting process is going to begin on Tuesday. The mechanism for gaining access to that vote involves being registered with Unity 2020. That means you need to sign up and give us your email address, join our email list. That is the mechanism. So for those of you who have not yet signed up with us, it is important that you do that tonight. All right. Is there anything I've missed on that front, Elisabeth and Ryan?
I think you've covered it.
All right. Cool. So
You'll receive, I'll just add one thing. You'll receive further instructions on Monday evening for those who've registered. And the voting begins on Tuesday, like Bret said.
All right, great. Now, we need to... Sorry, I'm still struggling with this small font. So I think we wanted to talk a little bit. We get a lot of questions in the Unity 2020 movement about various questions like, what is our ballot access plan? Obviously, it's too late to collect signatures. We've said that we do have a ballot access plan, et cetera. We also receive feedback about the fact that several people, Andrew Yang has expressed doubt about the Unity ticket, and yet he is on our list of nominees. Dan Crenshaw has said he's not planning to run for higher office. So there's a question in the air, which is, what is it that we are thinking in light of the fact that some of the people that we have nominated are apparently not yet on board? And we wanted to have a little discussion about this so you could understand how we're thinking about it. I think the first thing to say is I would expect people who were in a good position to lead the nation to have this reaction until we deliver a groundswell. And so this is very much a matter of the complexity of the political situation that we find ourselves in. That is to say, Andrew Yang is simultaneously somebody who appeals to a great many of us who see the danger that the republic is in. He represents somebody who has expressed a new approach that has captured the imagination of many. And he is also somebody who is still functioning within the Democratic establishment. So he is in a position where we do not want him burning bridges, and he does not want to burn bridges. And so we essentially expect for him to decline until we make it clear that there is some path for him to actually achieve a leadership position. You guys want to?
This goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In,
so this goes far beyond Andrew Yang. This is every candidate that has been nominated for our short list. They are all patriots, and they are all willing, we would imagine, willing to step up once the American people call for them to lead the country. And so we need to create this groundswell now, and we need everyone's support, and we need everyone to show that these are the leaders that we deserve and that we need in this country to really lead us into a future that we can be proud of and that we are not fearful of, because right now our country is going in a direction that none of us want to go in.
Yeah, I would just add to that, you know, if anyone who wound up on our short list were to say yes today, to me personally, that would be disqualifying, because they wouldn't be demonstrating the presence of mind to make hard decisions and take the proper amount of calculated risk, right? It's on us. It's on the people who've already been volunteering for months. It's on the people listening to this call to become inspired and look at the trash on either side of the normal offering, reject it, and build the public call to action that doesn't ask Andrew Yang, that doesn't ask Dan Crenshaw, that doesn't ask any of the other the other four people on our list, but demands it of them as their patriotic duty.
Great. And so this also suggests that really the answer to many of these questions is one of whether or not we can get enough people to admit that they understand that we have to do something unusual, like a Unity 2020 proposal, in order to give the legitimacy that will allow people who know that some kind of new leadership is necessary to join us publicly. So please appreciate the position that we are in, and also appreciate the position that those who are functioning at a high level in our political structure find themselves in. It's a very difficult one, and were you in their shoes, you might very likely recognize the need for something new and different, and also recognize the hazard of being too direct about that in public. All right, let's see. Next thing on our list.
So I think we can fire off with the first question.
Good.
From Democracy AI.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So why don't we go ahead? Noah, I know you're not on camera right now, but would you mind firing off the next question, please, so our viewers and our audience participants can answer the first question? Which, Bret, do you want to kick us off?
Sorry. Is Noah not able to do it?
Okay. Well, no, sorry. He's kicking it off on Democracy AI.
Okay. So I think the first question is, which of the 9 possibilities in terms of tickets that the Unity 20, that the 6 nominees would generate, which of those tickets do you prefer and why?
So all of you were asked in the onboarding to select a ticket that you chose. So we're asking you, why did you choose that ticket? And we would like to see your guys' answers and understand where you're at right now.
And for those watching that maybe didn't get in until before the maximum was reached on Democracy AI, And while that question is being asked on Democracy AI, can we maybe enumerate those tickets and talk a little bit about the process of assembling a list of 9 out of a list of 6?
Great. Are you asking me?
Sure.
Okay. So essentially, what we discovered in our primary process was that the Unity 2020 community nominated 6 people at a disproportionate level. And it just so happened that 3 of those people were identified as left of center and 3 of those people were identified as right of center. So the left of centers were Tulsi Gabbard, Andrew Yang, and Jesse Ventura. And the right of centers were Admiral McRaven, Jocko Willink, and Dan Crenshaw. And so we could go through the math here, but it's probably pretty clear. You can take any one of those left of centers and you can pair them with any one of 3 on the right, and then you can go to the second left of center and pair them with any one of the 3 on the right, etc. And you come up with 9 possible combinations. Now, I should remind people why it is there were various reasons to have a left of center and a right of center paired, but the most prominent of those reasons and the most important is that one of the things that divides Americans is a fear of the other side, and that the values that one holds might be frozen out, or is sometimes frozen out of government when the pendulum shifts to the other side. And so in order to break the increasing polarization, our plan ensures that your values, as long as they're somewhere near the mainstream, are always in the room. That is to say, whenever there is a discussion of what policy direction to take, your values will be represented. Somebody in the room understands them keenly by virtue of the fact that they are home values to them. And because our team would be drafted under the agreement that they would govern together by consensus, it's not to say that you will be thrilled with every policy, but it is to say you can be comfortable that every policy takes into account that which you hold at the highest level. All right. You guys have stuff to add on this front?
I think there's an add-on here. Oh, Elizabeth?
No, go for it.
Well, there's an add-on here that there's 2 concerns, and one of them you just laid out, which is, I'm left of center, which I am. I want to know that there's a left of center person in the room. But the reason I'm an early adopter to Unity 2020 is not so much because I want a left of center voice in the Oval Office or in any position of power. It's because I'm looking around me and I'm seeing my neighbors, my fellow citizens, inches away from tearing out each other's throat, and I'm seeing that as a consequence of their insecurity. So when the morning of November 4th arrives in 2020, and we have an answer that's part of the duopoly, the people that are the people that are driven most insane by not having a voice in the Oval Office are going to be very distraught, and that distress is going to manifest it. And that's part of the danger that I think we're trying to prevent with this movement. It's not just the danger of a Trump. It's not just the danger of a Biden. It's the danger of large populations of our fellow citizens reacting to their fear of not being represented by causing massive amounts of civil unrest. So yes, I want to feel represented as part of the Unity ticket, but I also want my political opponents to feel represented by a Unity ticket, so that the temperature of the nation lowers, because the temperature has been rising steadily and at a increasing rate of change for several months now.
I think that's very, very well said. Elisabeth, did you want to jump in?
I have some results actually from Democracy AI that I'd like to share about some of the some of the ticket choices that people have made so far. So we have 62% of our current audience think that Jocko and Tulsi are both charismatic, that would be able to win over a lot of voters from either of their respective sides of the aisle. And a lot of the answers that we're getting here are all based on the character of the candidates, which is something that you don't hear a lot of people talk about anymore. You don't hear people talk about character as much as you hear them talk about, you know, the negative aspects of people and what's not serving you in particular. But here, our second answer, we have that Andrew and Jocko have qualities which appeal to both sides and less dirty laundry, which I think really speaks to the values-driven aspect of Unity 2020 in a way that I think that, you know, none of the political parties do at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Now, one thing that I thought was interesting was our process. You know, we're all new to this. Everybody, including me in this entity, is a volunteer, and we're discovering how to do this on the fly. Nonetheless, we created a process. We've attracted people. These people have expressed preferences. It is amazing how nonpartisan things are within the movement and how balanced the nomination process ended up being between right and left. That was an accident that the top six, who were the most popular by a large margin, turned out to be so evenly divided as they did. But I think the thing that's hard for me to express is how easy, in some sense, that means it is to find candidates that are better than the ones settled on by the parties. That there's something about the process that the parties engage in, and I would argue about the thing that drives the parties, the actual purpose that those parties serve. Its purpose is not to find high-quality patriotic leaders. If it was, it would succeed much better than it actually does. It's doing something else, and it's pretending to identify these people. And so, if nothing else, I think we have established that citizens simply figuring out how to arrange a process that works better aren't finding that difficult. We are able to identify people who are more qualified, less polarizing, people who can talk to each other. I mean, it's a shame that Tulsi was not able to join Dan and me, and Eric would also have been present in that conversation. But one of the things that's so interesting is Dan and Tulsi are from opposite sides of the aisle, but they're friends. They get along. They don't have a problem interacting productively. So this tells us how far off our process is, that it's constantly settling on people who are less capable of interaction and less likely to trigger people's sense that they are honorable.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more with you, Bret. And I think that this movement for me has really been a proof of concept. You know, my friends and family ask me what I've been doing for the last month and a half. And I have found a group of people that believe that we can come together in disagreement and fully make things better and make the country better. And I think that the candidates that we've chosen and that we've nominated are like the biggest manifestation of that, because every day we're all, you know, back and forth, and we spent so many hours making this happen. And this has been truly a show that America is still capable of agreement and coming together and compromising on things that need to be compromised in order to make progress. And it's really been a beautiful process.
Yeah, it is. I hope we succeed, but, you know, succeed or fail at the initial mission that we've chosen. It is heartening to have a process that brings together people who are clearly ready to participate this way with each other. And so it's also something I've seen in my life prior to Unity 2020, where I found myself interacting with lots of people who were, you know, quote unquote, from the other side, lots of conservatives. And it was amazing how regularly I felt welcomed by them. I got a lot of curiosity. You know, there was a belief among many conservatives that, you know, a rational liberal was not something that they were even sure existed. And in any case, I've had many, many conversations, and we are told things that are not true about how difficult it is for us to get along, and hopefully the unity movement will reveal to people that there is a path to getting along, and it's not that difficult. It's a matter of disbelieving what you've been told about how unreasonable other people inherently are.
Yeah, there was a moment during the 2016 primaries that stuck with me like a knife in the back, and it was during one of the primary debates, and it was sort of the last closing question, and for the Democratic primary, and the question asked was to the effect of, "What do you think is the greatest threat to America?" And I don't know whether it was just Bernie and Hillary at this point, or whether there were some other answers, but I only remember there are two answers. Bernie said climate change. And yeah, that's a standard left-leaning answer. You wouldn't necessarily get a lot of agreement to that on the right side of the aisle. But Hillary's answer was the Republicans. And in that moment, she lost the election and won the primary. And that's the problem with our process right now, right? Is because we have these engines that force you to tear apart the country in order to have the chance of running it. And it needs change. And to riff off of your point, Elisabeth, I just have to echo everything you said. Since joining this incredible group of volunteers, I am gobsmacked day after day after day of just how much work people are putting in, and how much just raw talent and creativity is at display every single day. And the best part is, I think maybe I've met dozens of people over the last several weeks and months that I've worked with on various projects, and I think I maybe know two of their political orientations. Like, it doesn't come up. We recognize the problem. And it's like, okay, if we can get off this brink, if we can save ourselves from this hazard, then let's start an argument, and let's have some great arguments. But first, let's bail the water out of the boat and get to shore in time. And it's incredibly encouraging because, Bret, to your point, everyone knows we're making a moonshot right now. Like, no one has any illusions about it. We're not delusional people. We're recognizing the magnitude of the challenge, and recognizing that given the magnitude of the danger, we have to attempt the magnitude of the challenge. And if we fail, then this is the network of people that I want to be able to call to lower the temperature and keep our country together in the wake of whatever happens on November 4th, when Trump cries fraud or Biden cries suppression, and some number of people, regardless of whether they're from the blue team or the red team, are in the streets ready for blood.
So I want to talk about two things that surround this issue. One of them has to do with what we think is in the minds of people who we would imagine would be on board and yet are slow to come around. So I can't quite help it, but I'm building a model in my own mind of what people's resistance is, because in their regular lives, I hear people complaining about the quality of the choices they've been offered. I hear people fearing for the future. I see people choosing to move, like leaving cities that they've lived in for decades. Some of them are selling homes. They don't even know where they're going, right? So there's something going on that would seem to suggest that this was obviously the moment. I mean, we haven't elected the next president. It seems like an obvious moment at which we could do something new and different. And yet, even as people are upending their lives and contemplating things they never thought that they would have to worry about, there is still resistance to something of this nature. And so anyway, I'd be curious if you guys have a sense of what it is that keeps people from joining, and then I'd be happy to share what I think is up.
Well, really quick, I think this is a perfect question. Noah, if you're on the line listening, if we can relay this question to those watching, because I'd love to hear what Democracy AI has to say about it.
And let me just interrupt you right there, Ryan, because Democracy AI, 65% of our participants want to know what we see as the biggest challenges for this movement. And I think that's really the biggest question on everyone. Yeah, so we're all
we're all of like mind. Okay, cool.
Right,
it's
all the
almost like
minds
we
are
all
meeting
see
here.
the elephant in the room.
Right, and the donkey.
And the donkey, there
and
you
the
go.
gorilla. So, if I can rephrase your question a little bit, I think, what is it that stops someone who buys a bumper sticker that says Giant Meteor 2020 or Any Functioning Adult 2020? What is it that stops the person that buys that bumper sticker from signing on board? Because it seems like that's the bumper sticker version that illustrates the problem. But for some reason, there's, instead of actually trying to articulate or fight for or seek a solution, it turns into cynicism. So is it just the sheer sense of impossibility? Is it just the sheer sense of being outnumbered, or the learned helplessness, as Eric said on the first campfire? What is it?
Well, I think
a lot of it. Oh, I was going to say that I think a lot of it comes down to comfort. People are comfortable where they are, as far as where they are intellectually or where they are in their day-to-day lives, whether or not that means that they struggle financially or anything like that. I think it's really difficult for people to make a change and for people to imagine something that's not there. It's deeply unsettling and uncomfortable to imagine something that doesn't exist. And then when the answer to your questions, or when the answer to, whatever you can't imagine, when it's right in front of you, it's even more difficult to accept that, I think, because you have a different idea of what it should look like, or this or that, and you just have these different conceptions. And so I think our biggest challenge is showing people that we're all in this together and we're all learning together, and nobody has all the answers. And that's something that I think is really important to remember, is that while we're up here and, we've been in this movement for a while, and Bret has, a lot of public notoriety, none of us have all of the answers. But we can find the solution together. And I think that's what's really important to remember. But it's difficult for people to get there because we want to be told what to do and when to do it.
Well, I want to point out something. I think you're right about comfort, and I think you're right about your answer hints at the following thing. People fear being blamed for something, right? Everybody knows that there's an outcome in the next election that will cause whatever group they're hanging out with to be frightened and upset. And it doesn't matter whether you understand, for example, that we built the Unity 2020 proposal so that it would not spoil an election, so that we would not be putting people who support us in the position of being blamed. People are so used to the idea that if you do anything other than what your friend group is saying is the required action in this election, that you're responsible for whatever outcome might happen other than, the win. And I should say, for whatever reason, I'm hearing this more from Democrats at the moment than I am from Republicans. And I don't know why that is, because I don't think it's inherently one side of the aisle or the other. But in this election, there is a sense of moral obligation not to think outside the box. And people say this. They say, blue no matter who, right? Blue no matter who. And they'll frankly talk about all sorts of things that might be true of Biden that don't dissuade them from thinking that this is the answer. And I think what distinguishes the constituency of the unity movement is a recognition that everybody seems to see one disaster or the other, and a small number of people see two disasters and an uncertain choice between them. I honestly don't know which outcome I fear more, right? I know that Trump nominally is farther from the values that I think are most important, but I don't know that a Trump presidency is more dangerous than a Biden presidency in light of what Biden is playing with in terms of partners and policy. So to me, I'm not all that interested in which disaster it's going to be, because I think both of these disasters are so dangerous that it is unthinkable that we cannot at least attempt to divert our course, which is the whole reason I'm here. I'm trying to divert our course from disaster. And I think a lot of people who were thinking similarly heard that message and responded. But when we talk to other people, if you have a blind spot that covers one of the disasters, right, and you only see the other disaster, then the point is, well, this election is as obvious as it could be, right? You got to vote for A, or you've got to vote for B. And the problem is, how do you reveal to people what's in their blind spot?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think there's something I want to highlight about what you just said, and having watched a lot of your arguments and streams for a while now, Bret, I find that there's a response that comes back to not necessarily your arguments in specific, but this style of argument that tries to not have either of those blind spots, that tries to recognize where we're at. And it's the both sidisms, it's the milquetoast that's discussed with milquetoast moderation. And the thing to convey, and I'm saying this just because I think it's important for people to know, is that the argument isn't that the two sides are the same. They're very different. They have a very different taste and character and shape. But they have a charge symmetry, right? The tension between the two of them is in some sort of balance, even though it's playing out in different fields, right? In the federal government right now, the Republican interests are overwhelmingly overrepresented. In the sort of, if I could coin the sort of federal cultural government, right, in Hollywood and in the universities, it's universally left of center, right? So there's domain distinctions about where these battles are playing out, but there's a symmetry of tension. And I'm less interested in which team wins the tug of war. What I'm interested in is the amount of explosive potential energy that is being generated in the rope, because when that rope snaps, like it doesn't matter who gave the last tug that snapped the rope. What matters is that the rope is snapping and we're all going to be bleeding.
Yeah, I think that's very, very well said. Nonetheless, I have a sense that there's something in the tension between if people fast forward and anything that is displeasing to their social group occurs in this election, they fear that they will be blamed if they have done anything other than the standard thing. And I think, frankly, I almost see like rooms full of people, all of them wanting to entertain some other possibility, but all of them are afraid that the room is going to hold them responsible. And, it's the kind of thing that really, it requires almost a comedian to figure out how to phrase it to get everybody to laugh and simultaneously acknowledge they're all fearing each other. Everybody's fearing the room is going to hold them responsible when really the room wants to revolt together.
Yeah.
And let me just chime in here with the audience's answers, which are much, much simpler than ours. So effectively, our audience says that people haven't heard about it. That they don't know about it, or that it's impossible. And I think we sort of touched on the impossible part, and that sort of like stepping outside of your frame of mind so that you can see that maybe this is viable. First of all, it's 2020 and anything is possible. Second of all, it's possible because we do have a plan. And one of the other big questions from the last poll of when we asked the audience 4 questions was, let me pull it up right here. Sorry, I'm pulling it up. Where is it? Here we go. Are you keeping the ballot access strategy a secret because those who oppose Unity 2020 could foil the plan in some way if it were to get out? And I think that this question hits on a lot of aspects of what we're all saying, what's holding people back. Yes, people don't know about it, but when they do, they recognize that there are forces that are working against us and that could work against us that could seriously damage the movement. And that's not a reason that well, I've lost my train of thought now, but that's the question is, are you keeping the ballot access strategy a secret because those who oppose Unity 2020 could foil the plan in some way if it were to get out? And Bret, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah. So let's just say, first of all, we all know the plan. There is one. Okay. So the people who say there's no plan, that this is mathematically impossible at this point, are just simply incorrect. The only reason to keep it secret is to keep those who oppose any sort of Unity plan, including Unity 2020, from foiling the plan in order to continue to hold whatever power they hold. So I don't think that it's a secret that a plan that seeks to restore the public's influence over policy would have many enemies, that those enemies would be well-resourced and would use any means at their disposal. So there's really no reason to share information with them. It just seems to me very straightforward. We could, in an effort to show that we are, not lying, we could reveal the plan at some substantial cost to the plan's working. Now, that said, we are getting to a point where it becomes important to share the plan and to activate it. And we will get there soon. If you want to be kept apprised of things, this is an excellent reason that you should register for our email list so that you can be looped in as quickly as possible. But I think at some level, I want those who are listening to listen better and to think harder, right? To the extent that you want something different to happen, to the extent that you are looking at the choices that the major parties have delivered you and thinking to yourself, oh my God, how could we possibly be in such a bind? Then you are also somebody who should be open to the idea that if there's a way to get there and it requires you not knowing this instant exactly how it works, that you should be on board with that. And, if it turns out we're lying, I guess you'll find that out and we'll have egg on our face, but would we really be doing that? It just doesn't make any sense from my perspective. Does it make sense to pretend that there's a plan when there isn't, when that will ultimately become clear? Of course it doesn't. So it doesn't mean the plan will work. Doesn't mean you're going to like it. But is there a plan? Of course. And we've been clear with you all along about that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'd like to add on to that. Oh, you go, Elizabeth.
No, please, Ryan.
Well, there's a distinction, right? And this is clear to all of us, and it's clear to everyone that's already signed on. But I think it's sometimes not clear to the critics, or at least they weaponize the potential ambiguity that a plan is not synonymous with a guarantee, right? So if I can touch on that word impossible, right? There's two types of impossible. There's very, 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 very difficult, and then there's perpetual motion. There's violating the second law of thermodynamics, right? And a plan gets you to the second type of impossible. But, it was impossible for colonists to go up against the largest empire the world has ever known. It was impossible to abolish slavery and maintain the Union. It was impossible to fly. It was impossible to secure women's suffrage. It was impossible to go to the moon. The history of this country is a history of impossible accomplishments. And it's our turn. So are you going to try, or are you going to give up without trying and let our country disintegrate?
which it clearly is doing. So, we're being forced into attempting the impossible, and it shouldn't shock anybody that people are responding. Anyway, go ahead, Elisabeth.
Oh no, I was going to say that. When our audience on Democracy AI went through the onboarding questions, they identified as their different age groups. So we've categorized people into boomers, millennials, etc. And it seems that boomers and millennials, surprise, surprise, don't agree on a lot of things. However, we see that there is a lot of entrenchment from boomers on not being able to break outside of the frames, that they don't think it's realistic and they can't get away from the party, that cynicism is too high. And so I think we need to really, Ryan, to your point, look to these things in the past that we've accomplished and all of these, incredible things that were never possible that now, shape our world. We need to really look forward, take those and look forward into the future, and not rely on the frames that were once that have once served us.
Yeah, I mean, we are in some sense,
or didn't even serve us, really. I mean, and if you look at it, they didn't really serve us at all, because look at where we are. However, we can accomplish so much, and we need to believe in ourselves to do that. We need to believe in this.
So at some level, I would ask people to stop considering Unity 2020 in isolation, right? You may consider this so unlikely as to be not worth considering, but how likely is it that a major party would field a candidate who can't be allowed off script because he's no longer competent to deploy a message off the cuff? This is a remarkable thing. This is a candidate who's going to face debates, presumably. Nobody knows how that's going to play out. So we are dealing with a landscape that is already in the realm of the impossible, not because of anything that we've done. We're just simply responding to it. So anyway, it's a landscape of the impossible. It is the era of the impossible. And the fact that this is an impossible plan, as Ryan points out, it's of, was it type 2 impossibility, Ryan? Yeah. Type 2 impossibility. All right. Do we have more data coming back from Democracy AI?
Indeed, we do. We have a question here. What's the plan for continuing the movement after November if not enough swell to activate in this election? And what I would say to that is that Unity 2020, unity is about leadership. And regardless of our moonshot, what Unity does is it shows us who our leaders are in this country, and it helps us identify leaders not only on the public sphere, but in our own channels and in ourselves. And so I think that no matter what happens, we need to continue seeking the values in other people and finding the leaders that we deserve.
Yeah, I think this is exactly right. And one thing I in fact, in all of the conversations inside the Unity movement that I've been party to, this has never really been a question. Wasn't on my mind when I set the ball in motion, but as soon as people started to gather around it and it became clear that we don't see exactly the same thing, but we see very much analogous, frightening processes unfolding, danger to the Republic that seems to call many of us to action. If the plan fails to recapture the White House in 2020, that's a terrible setback, but it doesn't reduce the need for a unity movement. Obviously, the need for a unity movement only increases in that frightening circumstance. So at some level, it has to continue. We are learning from this process. We're discovering each other, which is really, it's a great reason to join, is that finding out how many people, far-flung people that you would never have encountered otherwise, are feeling the same way about where we are and recognizing the same sorts of obligation, that, the movement has to continue. It has to do whatever is necessary. And I would say in some sense, what I'm realizing is that it is simultaneously a movement that is apolitical, it is non-ideological, but that has more content than you would imagine. In other words, a non-ideological movement should oppose corruption. And so in some sense, unity is inherently a movement against corruption. It is a movement about restoring the democratic force so that it governs policy. Essentially, if your ideology is non-ideological, if you believe in democracy, if you believe that consent of the governed is the source of the legitimacy of government, then you should be for a process that purifies that so that it actually is meaningful consent of the governed rather than coerced consent where really, manufactured consent as Chomsky would have it. So yes, the movement has to continue. I'm sure it will change in the aftermath of this election one way or the other. Hopefully we can keep it on this positive track because inside the movement it is hopeful and reassuring and patriotic. And as Ryan said up at the top, you meet people, you find that you are very much in alignment with them, and you don't know their political background because it's not highly relevant, right? Patriotism is patriotism.
And to your point, Bret, I think as much as this is about leadership, it's about teamwork. And that's the whole point of the unity ticket. And in thinking about the candidates, I know that, let's say Crenshaw, for instance, a lot of people think that maybe Crenshaw is, not favorable enough to the Democrats or something like that. And what I say to that is that, okay, so if Crenshaw is then paired with Tulsi Gabbard, that balances out. And so that someone's fighting for you in the office and it's really about balance and about unity, but leadership and teamwork effectively. So.
Yeah. And leadership, not just in the political realm, right? It's, I've met more leaders in the last 3 weeks than probably in my entire life interacting with this team. And, the people that get on board that I've seen, those are the people that when there's tear gas in a street and there's a standoff between some group of nutcases, and I don't care what banner they're flying, but some group of nutcases and some group of authoritarians, when there's a standoff and there's tear gas and there's rubber bullets, these are the people that are going to run out and pull a kid out of a fog of tear gas and give them a bottle of water and give them shelter. Those are the people that are going to look out for their fellow citizens no matter what. And that's the banner that we're flying under right now. And that's going to be our job if we don't get in the Oval Office, if we're not able to prevent this whatever sort of snap or schizophrenic fit that our country is headed towards. Our job is to heal and protect each other in whatever challenges we have to go through afterwards.
All right, I want to try a formulation out on you. When the Evergreen situation happened to Heather and me, we were asked to reflect on it many, many times by many different people. And it became clear that there were a few things that were the key lessons. The one that maybe is most prominent in my thinking is crisis reveals everyone's character, for both better and worse. I've seen people who you would absolutely think would be courageous fold and display pure cowardice, and I've seen people that you wouldn't imagine had heroic courage within them display it. And the sense is there was nobody left on the sidelines afterward because the crisis forced everybody to reveal which of those things resided within them. And I think if we can go back a little bit to the conversation we were having 20 minutes ago, I think there's a difference between seeing a crisis and thinking it's other people and seeing a national crisis that clearly involves us all. Only one of those things produces the reaction to crisis that will tell us who you really are, right? Until you see that actually it's crisis either way, we don't know, because people are telling themselves, oh, it's very simple. You just do this. You pull the lever for these people. So I guess what I'm I'm thinking is, in some sense, the unity movement is composed of people who have seen the full crisis early enough and reacted with courage rather than cowardice. And what I'm hoping is that however it happens, as the crisis reveals itself, as it becomes impossible to deny that there is no safe answer here, that both answers are dangerous in different ways, and we're going to get a very destructive outcome in either case. As that reveals itself, people's character will also. And I think the point is, it's not really unity or not. It's unity now or when you finally get around to recognizing how much danger we're in. For the courageous people, I think that's kind of it. At some point, you're going to break free from the narrative you've been told is right, which is you have to choose this side because the other side is the hazard.
And I would imagine that a lot of our viewers right now, and especially the people on Democracy AI, are these courageous patriots who want to know what they can do and how we're going to do it. And a lot of the questions that we're getting on Democracy AI are about strategy and numbers and where we are right now. And I think that it's really important to reiterate, I know we keep saying it like broken records, but the groundswell is hugely important to our success. And so strategies around that, we are cooking them. They are on the way. And also it begins with you. And it begins with the people that you can tell and the people that you can convince that something is really wrong and that we have the solution. And something else, Bret, that a lot of people are asking is, have we spoken to the candidates who have been nominated? And I think that's a fair question because we need to know, how viable are these candidates? And in the beginning of the show, we talked about the political complexity of coming out in favor of unity or not. And if anyone did that now, it would almost be like political suicide. So if we could speak a little bit about that and about our candidates and how we're communicating with them, and if we are, that would be, I think the audience would like to know.
Sure. So let me say, we have not sought the candidates out. It's too early. We need a groundswell. That's really on the public. I can't say who we have and have not spoken to, but I can say there has not been a systematic effort to talk to people who have been nominated, because at the moment, what this is we are building to a draft. And I believe everyone on the list that was advanced, the list of 6, would take the job if we could provide a path to it. And they would do so on the basis that they clearly are patriotic. They love their country. They understand the importance of this nation to the functioning of the West. And that means that whether it's a job they want or not, that it's the right thing to do. But, put yourself in their shoes. The movement is not big enough to ask somebody to compromise themselves politically in any other milieu, nor would we want them to. Because if Unity 2020 fails to win the White House this time around, these people are still prominent functionaries within the structure. And so to the extent that the right things are desirable, if the structure continues to limp along the way it is, then we want these people as powerful as they can be within the movement, which does not mean that it makes sense for us to approach them this early. That said, we would like to have the firepower that it would make sense to approach them and say, there's a path. We have the power to make this happen, and will you join us? So we're looking for that moment, and we hope we get there.
And I think, sorry, Ryan, I keep interrupting, but I think what something to tack on to that is that we know that all of our candidates right now, they all have huge support already on Twitter and social media. They already have a huge following. We need you, their following, who are sure are tuning into this to see, can my candidate get past the RNC and DNC that they haven't been able to bypass in years? Is it viable, and can they do it? And we need your help and your support in getting out to your, the leaders that you want in this country to really make this work. So again, and I know I keep saying it, but this starts with you. And the Groundswell really is about you communicating with your people.
It is.
Yeah. And
go ahead.
Oh, well, first of all, Elisabeth, don't apologize for interrupting me. I was praying that you would say something because I was deep in thought. So, second of all, yeah, I think, we're going to be building out as much tooling as we can for you, the supporters, our fellow patriots, to convince your friends, family, and build this groundswell. But if you feel disheartened, consider the elephant in the room of 2020, right? Everyone understands what an R value is right now, because we've had this pandemic, and we know how we now know why you call it going viral when something gets really possible on social media, because we're being presented with this real world example from whence the term came. So it's short notice, but it can be done. We can have a pandemic of patriotism in this country, and all we have to do is work for it.
Terrible metaphor. Surely we have somebody expert in marketing who can talk you out of saying that.
Yeah, well, I'm the tech guy.
Yeah, you are a tech guy.
Yeah, well, I just said it out loud. So,
yep.
Whoops.
Yes. Pandemic is definitely not, in 2020 especially, it's not the term you want to use. But anyway, I interrupted you. If we imagine
No. I was clearly saying something stupid, so you should have.
No, you were saying something smart in an unpalatable way. All right, so here's the thing. There is organic skepticism and there is cultivated skepticism of what we're up to. The parties have invested mightily in the idea that nothing outside of them can work. And this is clearly incorrect, but people have accepted it and they have understood that to play with things outside of the mainstream offerings is to invite ridicule and stigma. And, many will remember that Hillary Clinton portrayed Tulsi Gabbard as a Russian asset, right, during the primaries. It was a very nasty stigma for her to deploy, obviously one that had no basis in reality. But the idea was to tar her with the same brush that had been used for Jill Stein, the idea being that anything outside of the mainstream offerings empowers the greater evil. Now, of course, we've dealt with this ad nauseum. This plan is built so it doesn't create that hazard, to the extent that it is, for some reason in this election cycle, Democrats who are complaining loudly about the possibility of spoiling the election. Actually, Unity 2020 seems to draw slightly greater support from Republicans. And so, therefore, if spoiling is your fear, it should be the Republicans who level that accusation. To the extent that there's any bias whatsoever, it is in that direction. And yet we don't typically hear it from them. We hear it from Democrats. But what I want to get at is somehow we have to reject the idea that we will take responsibility for the whatever bad outcome it is that people fear in this election, for daring to think outside the box. The fact is, the bad outcomes are the responsibility of the parties, right? This is the natural outgrowth of the corrupt system that they have instantiated and all of the bulwark that they have installed to make sure that nothing can challenge it. Our challenging it is absolutely necessary at this point. We are, if anything, late to the party, not early, to the extent that people are saying, oh, do this in 2024. My feeling is this should have been 2016, right? This is a disaster already well underway. And so if you're contemplating joining Unity 2020 or becoming public about your skepticism about the major party offerings, then what we can say is there's a very vibrant group of people who have already forged this path and are not going to accept blame. In fact, I think the point is we are trying to avert the disaster that is coming, and the disaster belongs squarely at the feet of people who did nothing. So it is quite the opposite of the stigmatizing story that has been advertised to you. And I think we should just make no bones about that.
I couldn't
jump
agree
on
more.
in. The water's fine.
The water's fine. It's going to boil, but it's not there yet.
And when we asked our audience about what they can do to increase our support, the top answer was to have conversations about Unity 2020 with friends and family. This person has plenty of friends from all over the spectrum. And that's really important to recognize, is that you do have friends and family from all different political walks of life. And wouldn't you love to be able to have Thanksgiving dinner and not like be super stressed about that conversation that's going to happen? Not to trigger anyone, but another thing that people that people are saying is posting on social media. And this is something that we haven't quite touched on yet, is the power of social media and how it can be a powerful tool and also hugely detrimental. I think that echo chambers are keeping us all from each other. You know, they're the caves that we find ourselves in. And so really stepping outside of those and sharing messages that maybe people in your newsfeed have never seen, people in your timeline have never seen, I think is really important. And so we do have tons of content that we would love for you to share. We're sharing with you all the time on Twitter and Instagram. We have our official channels, Articles of Unity, and then we have a lot of other, awesome fan pages. And so you can check those out on our website. And this is how we get the word out, and this is how we increase our support. And we're glad that you recognize that these are the modes that we're doing it in.
Yeah, if I could riff on that just a tiny bit. Social media is great, but it's also part of the engine that got us to where we are, right? Those echo chambers, to your point, Elisabeth. What I would suggest is get to know your neighbors again. Get to know the people that are within 200 feet of you, 99% of your day, that you might not even know their names because of the sort of direction that the country has been going with depersonalization and sort of commodification of every interaction. Those one-on-one conversations, like, it's really hard, number one, to get out of the echo chamber, and number two, that thing that you, Bret, were talking about, that whatever that social force is that says, oh, if I'm going to think outside the box, the room is going to punish me, right? A one-on-one conversation is way safer than you think it is. Because if you go into a one-on-one conversation with the thought, psychologically, that you're under the gun of the group, the same person who might join in the taunting and mocking and saying that's impossible or that's harmful, don't you dare do that, in the group context, approaching them as an individual, you can actually get them to leave the script, right? Because the script is provided by the group of 30, and they invent it on the fly, or it emerges as some sort of multi-person emergent script, right? But a one-on-one conversation, it's actually remarkably easy to have those if you remember how. And they're both, even aside from Unity 2020, they're great for your psychological well-being to actually have those one-on-one interactions with people. And they are the most genuine and most effective way to connect with people and convince them and even be convinced. And that's the high ideal of negotiation that we're looking for in our eventual ticket, and also looking for in our nation's culture. So start to embody that right away and see what happens.
And I want to add two things, because I do think you're right. There's all the difference in the world between trying to do this in person, or at least personally with somebody, rather than where everything you're saying is broadcast and it produces the expected reaction. One thing is that you will be shocked at how frequently somebody is harboring similar thoughts but isn't saying so because of what they fear. So I live in Portland, as many of you will know, and when I interact with people, I am very careful not to nod along to the conventional wisdom of the left, which is obviously very prevalent here in Portland. But here's the interesting thing. This has never gone bad. Never once. Where if somebody voices an opinion, it's very frequent that I have a different opinion that contradicts the conventional wisdom. And I'm very careful to see if I can say it in such a way that it can be heard. And it is amazing how frequently what happens is somebody will say one of the standard things that you say nowadays, and I will say, I don't see it that way. Here's how I see it. And then what comes back is, oh, me too. I also have a suspicion that it isn't quite right, this, that, or the other way. Literally, this has never once gone badly. And so what I would say is there's a skill. It's very often that both of the standard viewpoints are just wrong. And there's some viewpoint that's approximately right. It's not necessarily in the middle, but it's composed of different stuff, right? So, for example, you will hear from some people very often on the right that COVID-19 is much less serious than we thought, that it's a flu at worst, right? And you will hear people on the left typically talking about the numbers of people who are dying from it and the massive death toll already. And so what I frequently say to people is, it's much less deadly than we feared and much more destructive, right? You can't hear that as one or the other because it isn't either of them. The idea that fewer people are dying, but more of the people who are recovering are actually permanently damaged, that is something you have to engage consciously and actively because it's not of some known stripe. So my point is, on virtually every issue, there's some way of not being seen by the person you're talking to as simply part of that group that they dislike and distrust. And if you can figure out how to say things such that you don't get immediately categorized as, another one of those, MAGA hat wearing, or another one of those Black Lives Matter, this, that, or the other. If you can just stay out of those traps, then you can have the conversation that Ryan is suggesting that you have, and you'll be amazed at, how wonderful it is to discover that those conversations can be had even with strangers, and B, how much more progress you're likely to make in convincing people that there's something to be done. All right.
I agree. And let me just point in one more thing from the audience. So first, Democracy AI is a really cool tool, and we have an awesome team on the back end. Shout out to Chris and Noah, who are synthesizing this as we're going. And they pointed out that first-time Democracy AI users are a little less likely than the average respondent to talk to others about Unity 2020. And I think that's really important to note, because I would think that first-time users are maybe tuning into this for the first time, or they just aren't as engaged, maybe like directly, because we do have a lot of other answers that, we have a lot of current volunteers on this call. So what I would say is that you have a home here. Like this, if you need talking points, if you need to just understand that there are people out there who agree with you about the fact that disagreement is okay, we're here. And we have a really exciting thing to announce at the end of the show, where you can connect with other people. So stick around. I know we're running a little bit over, but we'll get to it in just a minute. And I just want to say that 70% of our audience agree that talking to friends, family, and coworkers about Unity 2020 is the way that we're going to get this going. And we just have one more question for you. Noah, if you want to fire that off, then people can answer. And the question is, after this conversation, did your ticket preference change? And we might not have talked directly about the candidates, but maybe you started to see things in a different light, or maybe, in engaging, maybe you're on Twitter, maybe you're on Instagram, and you're seeing what the other what other people are saying. Maybe your preference has changed. And so we just like to see, if this conversation had any impact on that.
Great. Okay. So, seems to me that we are drawing to the end of the conversation. Are we going to await answers on that question?
Well, I can give my answer to that.
Okay.
Because it actually has changed. I have gone from really preferring a center-left paired with a center-right to preferring a center-right paired with a center-left candidate, which I think is quite an important distinction, depending on the results of the coin flip.
You want to spell that out a little bit more, Ryan?
Yeah.
No, that was an attempt at dry British humor.
Dry? No,
American.
It was.
So I didn't
dry.
pull it off. I didn't pull it off quite right.
No, you did. I just didn't want to laugh and then discover that you had actually meant something deep and leave you insulted and wounded here on camera with.
Oh well, I can take the laughter. That's fine.
Fair enough. All right. So, are we going to await the audience's answer to that question?
We don't. I just saw one really interesting answer that said, I don't have a preference yet, but I really, really, really don't want to vote for I really, really, really want to vote for a ticket that's not devoured by corruption. And I think that's a pretty salient response.
Wonderful.
Keeping an open mind and understanding that, where we're at.
Well, I think this is it's another thing that Unity has really accomplished already, is that the fact of the obvious corruption of these parties has been difficult to talk about, right? There's a tendency to want to see them as somewhat corrupt. And I think they have revealed themselves as much more corrupt than that. And to the extent that we can now talk about that in the open, that is progress of an important kind, because really the question is, until that problem is solved, we face the same issue, and we will continue to face it every election. So hence Unity. All right. So I think we should close this out here. Before we do that, we should alert you that there is I don't exactly know how to describe it. There is something unfolding in the aftermath of this campfire that involves...
Let me take it.
Okay, yeah. Go for it, Elisabeth.
Let me take it, Bret. So a lot of our volunteers, a lot of our supporters have been wanting to connect with people after the show and in general throughout the week and just in daily life. And so what we've created right now is something called a Campfire S'mores. And so these s'more sessions are for our viewers to connect after the show, to talk about the campfire, to talk about Unity, to talk about sort of what's going on in the world right now. And so we hope that you participate. We hope that you join. And you're going to go to the URL campfiresmores.articlesofunity.org. And again, you're able to connect, you're able to share, and you're able to really grow with people who are like-minded, but also disagree, and also disagree. And I think that, we hope that it'll be a really great experience for everyone. So head over again to campfiresmores.articlesofunity.org, and Zach's going to throw a slide up at the end that will tell you that URL.
So these s'mores, are they gluten-free?
Of course, I'm also gluten-free, so they have to.
They have to be gluten-free. Good.
Are they vegetarian?
I am sure these s'mores have never eaten meat. That is my feeling about them. All right, I dodged that bullet, did I not? Okay.
That was good.
Great. Any final thoughts, Ryan or Elisabeth?
Thank you, everyone watching, and thank you, Bret, for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys. It's been a fun conversation, and I also want to thank you both individually and as representatives of our amazing team of volunteers. I want to thank you for everything that you're investing in this. I know it is taking a huge amount from you, and I'm thrilled to meet kindred spirits who are similarly motivated to do something, because goddamn. Right? Okay. Anyway, thank you all for joining us, and we will see you on the next campfire. Don't forget to register for our email list, and if you're there, to vote for which tickets you want to see. Give us your ranked choice on that. All right. See you all soon enough.